Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we are going to discuss 1987's Opera, directed by Dario Argento and starring Christina Marsillach, Ian Charleson, Urbano Barberini, William McNamara, and Daria Nicolodi. Opera follows a soprano understudy named Betty who finally gets her chance in the spotlight after the lead in a new production of Macbeth is injured. Betty, however, is deeply superstitious when it comes to the Macbeth curse, and soon enough strange things begin to happen at the opera house. As Betty is stalked by a madman who forces her to watch as he commits horrific crimes, memories from her past begin to surface, and it becomes up to Betty to stop her stalker before he can strike again. Opera is full of all the atmospheric suspense and creative gory effects for which Dario Argento is known. Fairly well received at the time, Opera is for the horror fan that enjoys Argento's work or also enjoys an 80s slasher with a little extra style. Also joining me tonight are the talented Xena, Dixon, and Tyler Doupe. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. We have a special treat tonight. Tyler Doupe is joining us, me and Xena, my fabulous co-host, to discuss Dario Argento's opera tonight. How are you doing tonight, Tyler?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you too for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And how are you doing tonight, Xena?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good, good. Well, tonight we are going to talk about 1987's Opera. Although, I mean, it's a Dario Argento movie, though, and I know that we're all fans of Dario Argento, so I'm sure there's going to be some free-for-all in just discussing this brilliant director anyway. But as far as opera goes, I don't necessarily agree with this statement, but I think that there are a lot of people out there that consider opera to be sort of like the last of what they consider to be Argento's great horror films. Some might go a little earlier with Phenomena, Creepers, or Tenebrae, or maybe a little bit later with Trauma or Stendhal Syndrome, which, I love Trauma. I feel like, again, I don't necessarily agree that opera is the last of it, but I can understand the sentiment, at least in terms of like style. I feel like there are like definitely elements of his style still remaining in later films like Trauma or even Mother of Tears, which after a long time I also have come to love. But opera definitely has that perfect balance of like creativity. It's bizarre enough in a bizarre, fun way, but not too over the top. It's right to the line of bizarre, scary, intense, suspenseful. But in terms of Dario Argento's works, and now that this is Xena's first time watching opera out there, Tyler, you've obviously not seen opera before, correct?
Oh, I've seen it many times.
Okay. Now, I also came to it later. I probably saw it for the first time maybe like a year and a half ago. I had heard for a long time that sort of like it's one of the last great ones, and it was pretty well received at the time. So I wanted to kind of save it, and I'm glad I did because it was a solid choice for me. But in general, where does opera land on the list now of Argento films for both of you? Like for me, my favorite will always be Phenomena, Creepers, if you will. And then it's always kind of a tie with Suspiria and Inferno because I saw them both at the same time together. And then I think it's sort of like a tie between Opera and Tenebrae. So it's at the top of my list. It's not the top, but I'm curious for both of you. I'll ask Tyler first so Xena can have a second to think about it because it was her first time seeing opera. But Tyler, where do you fall? Where does opera fall for you on your like list of Argento movies? And I'm just going to clarify right now, everybody watching, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. But Tyler, do you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Of course, I don't know definitively precisely where I would rank it, but I love it. I mean, I love Suspiria. I love Inferno. I love Tenebrae, Phenomena. Opera, of course, is included with those. But I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's towards the top of my list. If we're ranking all of his films, it's towards the top of my list. Um, but I don't know that I could quite say, it's first, second, or third, because I love all of his movies so much, and there's just different things that I love about each of them. So I'm not sure that he for me at least, he's not a director that it's really easy for me to rank his films, because I love all of his. When he was good, he was really, really good. I mean, he's just so talented, and his films are so visually striking, and each one there's something different that I love about it. So it's not necessarily like a straight apples to apples. This is my first, second, third, fourth, and fifth favorite.
For sure.
But it's definitely one of my favorites.
Would you agree with the sentiment then that like maybe it's, what do you think about it being considered one of the last great ones, like in terms of his later ones and such?
I honestly think that's fair. I do like Trauma, but I still think it's a far cry from like Deep Red, or when he was really, just on fire. I feel like Trauma for me is one of the last films that he did that's worth watching. I'm really curious to hear that you've come, not curious, but interested, I guess, to hear that you've come around to Mother of Tears, because I've never really cared for that. But it makes me kind of want to give it a second look. Like, maybe, when I went into it, my expectations were kind of sky high. And, after seeing it, I was pretty disappointed. So, maybe seeing it with different expectations, I might come away with different ideas. But yeah, I think that it's somewhat fair to say that was probably his last truly great film. I think that he's done other films that are worthy of watching beyond that, but I think it's the last one, his last true must-see. And I guess that's why I'm surprised that neither of you guys had seen it until more recently. Because I think for me, if I love a director, I want to like devour everything that they've done. So I'm surprised that you guys slept on it, but I'm glad that you have both seen it now, so that we can talk about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, with Mother of Tears, the broad strokes for me, I didn't have super high expectations for it because Dario Argento in general, I came to later. Xena and I had discussed, and we did do a Dario Argento episode on Phenomena, aka Creepers. And, I loved Dario Argento before I knew that I loved Dario Argento. I had a VHS copy of Creepers. I watched it forever. I didn't really put together that it was Dario Argento. And then later on, I started hearing things like, have you ever seen Suspiria? So I came to it much later. But with Mother of Tears, once you kind of accept it for what it is, that it's not going to be early 80s slasher film, it for me, it just resonated a little bit stronger. It was a better movie the second time around. And Xena, now that you've seen Opera, and I know that you're also a fan of Inferno, and that was almost the choice for tonight. We were debating between Inferno and Opera. I just feel like I feel like Inferno is having like a slight resurgence of being a little bit more known. So I thought maybe Opera might be interesting. And then plus Xena hasn't seen it. So right. Xena, what do you think? What did you think of Opera in general? And do you think it's one of his better ones, not good ones, or somewhere in the middle?
Okay, so I have so much to say about this movie. First, whoa, I really do feel like I have been missing out in life because it has everything that I want. It has like the arts, there's some singing in there. It still has like those giallo elements. There's mystery, this outrageous dialogue. It's just, yes. I don't know, it's just really cool, and I'm not going to lie, and I know we'll talk about it more. I kind of knew who the killer was from the beginning, It was just like, okay, this is clear as day, but I don't know why I'm looking around like you guys in the room with me. But yeah, like I think it's a really fun movie, and it is crazy that I haven't watched it, and this has been a blind spot for such a long time. And many people, when they will find out that I've never seen it, they're like, oh no, you need to watch it. You need to watch it. But in my defense, I always have this thing, like if not even just someone, if so many people are telling me, hey, you need to see it, and just like that, no, you need to see it type of thing, right? And it's just kind of like, I'll get around to it. It was on my list. It's been on my list for years. Because I think I even watched Inferno recently, maybe like for the first time, like 6 years ago. And I remember I was going to watch Opera, but then I just didn't. And kind of like what you said, Justin, where it's just kind of like I knew that I loved Dario Argento before I knew actually who he was. And I think one of the first movies that I've ever watched of his it was Suspiria, you know, and I'm completely in love with it. And then from there, Deep Red, and then I have such a love, even though I know he did like just a segment in this anthology, Two Evil Eyes. It is just perfection, you know. So, and then kind of even going back to what Tyler said, where it is kind of hard for me to rank his movies. Like, I will say though, honestly, Opera is now a part of like the top 5 because I really, really enjoyed it. And I watched it already just twice, you know. I plan on watching it again because, you know, you feel like you like miss things and you kind of
Right.
want to put it more together. And then on top of that, it's always such a it's cool because we'll talk more about the leading character. There's something odd about her, you know, like she's not your traditional type of final girl, I guess you want to say, which we'll talk about. But yeah, like thank you so much for the recommendation. Like, ah, I really really loved it.
Yeah, I just, with Dario Argento in general, and I think that opera really encapsulates this. It is hard to like describe to a person. I think like a Dario Argento movie. I feel like the narrative is kind of always thin in his movies, but even so, there's so much happening visually that you feel like a really complete story has been told. I mean, there's definitely like this one, the dubbing in this movie I think is like overdone. Like William McNamara, her like the main character's Betty's like young lover guy. He he was in Copycat with Sigourney Weaver, so he has like a very clear American voice. So I don't know why they thought he needed to be dubbed with like a semi-British voice. He even talked about that, I think, on like the Blu-ray or something. So it's that kind of quality, that sort of maybe quirkiness that when people come to Dario Argento and they might at first like have an adverse reaction or like this is kind of cheesy or corny, but that's part of it. That's part of the joy
Right.
for me. And then you mentioned Xena, the music. I want to talk about this later, but I guess we can talk about it now. What do you guys think about like the music in this? For me, I really love, and he had kind of, I mean, he always used Goblin and all that, but like in Phenomena, it really kind of amped up the sort of juxtaposition between these sort of operatic or classic voices with the heavy metal. And
Mhm.
I always really liked that. And I liked that opera kind of kept that on. And also referencing Phenomena, I really enjoyed that opera was sort of his meta work, meaning at the end of opera he kind of shows you like how he did some of the effects from Phenomena. He's filming, the end of it takes place in the same like Swiss location, but the music plays a strong part. It really like sort of lulls you into this sort of like hypnotic state, and then you're like abruptly brought out of it with this heavy metal music, which at the time, very much symbolized like evil people. You had so many protests against it. But in general, like, what do you both think of the music in opera and in just in Dario Argento works in general? Xena, do you want to lead us off with this one, and then Tyler, if you could follow up?
Sure. Okay. Well, okay. I actually love the rock music in this one. I feel like it fit perfectly because there's already some symbols that's going on that we keep on seeing, like with the ravens as an example,
Mm,
and it's already like a gothic atmosphere. So it just kind of added I guess, more of the attention, like the tension to it. And you are so right with it being kind of like hypnotic because I found myself honestly, I literally watched it 2 nights in a row, and even with the second viewing it was like I've never seen it before, and you know what I mean, and it was
yeah.
just perfect. So I mean that is always one thing, even with his films, regardless of how you feel about his movies, I feel like his soundtracks are always top notch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like it's like a nightmare. Like I've explained Dario Argento as like a nightmare come to life, or it's like watching somebody's nightmare on
Right.
screen with this music. But Tyler, what do you think about, the music in opera and then in general the music of Dario Argento and his like the way he uses it?
I love the pairing of kind of violent imagery and hard rock music. I think it's maybe kind of like an obvious combination, but it's also, I think, for the most part, kind of underused. I mean, we saw in Wes Craven's Shocker him perhaps kind of paying tribute to that, or doing something kind of similar. But I feel like we don't see it enough. I think that they are I think that they go perfectly together, and I think opera is no exception to that. And I also think this is a little bit off topic, but I think that something that I find really interesting about Argento's work is that I don't think it's very approachable necessarily. I think if you just showed it to like, someone who didn't really understand horror, they wouldn't appreciate it. I remember the first time I saw Suspiria, I liked it, but I was like, that was really weird. Like, what is that even about? And that was one of the first Italian horror films that I watched. And I think Italian horror in general is kind of not very approachable. It's not necessarily something that you're like, weaned on. It's something that you kind of come to, I think, after you understand everything that draws influences from it, and the way that it kind of paved the road for the slashers of the late 70s and early 80s. And there's just so many different reasons to appreciate it. But I just think it's interesting how it's really kind of an acquired taste. It's like a fine wine or something. You don't necessarily like it or understand it the first time that you try it, if you're not really ready for it. But I think once you're ready, it's for me, it was just an immediate love affair. But like I said, the first time I saw Suspiria, it was one of the first Italian horror movies I saw. I just kind of came away wondering, like, what the hell did I just watch? That was just so weird. And the dubbing is awful. And, there's just so many things that are like, just peculiar about it. But, he's become one of my, top 5 favorite directors, and Suspiria is possibly my favorite horror film. So I just find that really interesting to think of the way that it's I think maybe in part it's aged well, and also in hindsight you can kind of see everything that his work has come to inspire. But to answer your question, yes, I love the music, and I can't really think of any of his early work that I didn't love the music in. I think he was really just really had a good ear for that.
So kind of, I agree with Tyler. Like, if you were to have someone watch Suspiria, because I tried that. So similar to Tyler, I watched Suspiria when I was in high school, and I didn't know how I felt about it. I realized that I liked it like weeks later, months later, because I kept on thinking about it. And I remember with a friend, we would always like watch movies. We would go to the video store, every Friday and watch movies. And she was like really getting into horror. She was like really into Rob Zombie and stuff. And I'm like, okay, she could be my horror buddy. Here we go. And I recommended her to check out Suspiria with her boyfriend. And she came back and she told me that she hated it. And it was just like, I was like, oh, because I was like really confused. And it was just like, I'm not going to lie, I got a little bit irritated with her, because I was just like, well, you need to watch it again. But now, as an adult, I understand why, because obviously it's not going to be for everyone. And kind of like, again, what Tyler said, there's a lot of stuff that's going on, not just only in Suspiria, but with his movies in general. And I think that you do have to have like a particular taste for it, but that's why we love Dario.
Right. Like you both saying, I think it's an acquired taste. I think I've also had a very similar reactions when I've shown people Suspiria, or where it's like, because it does just kind of have this abrupt ending, which is the opposite of opera, where it sort of has this ending that kind of goes on and on and on, which I like. I do think that, as much as I enjoy it, I think that he does struggle maybe sometimes with endings. He either just kind of ends it, or it does tend to go on and on. But I love it either way. I am big, though, on hit or miss if I like an ending like that. But most of my experiences with showing people Dario Argento have been the same sort of reaction, where they're, okay, Justin, thanks for making me watch that. Like, okay, and I think that it is something to be said about like maybe an American style of directing versus an Italian style. But I also think that that's also part of the difference / problem with why people may have had such an adverse reaction to the Suspiria remake. I think that they both achieved a certain sort of level, but very different and in very different ways. I feel like Dario Argento, he creates a movie. It feels like the kind of nightmare that you sort of like wake up from, like, oh, what just happened? And you have that energy. Whereas Luca Guadagnino's remake was more of a sedation. You kind of felt like you were in this nightmare, and then somebody drugged you, and you sort of were like waking up from this, like, what just happened? And that's two very different reactions. Again, it's not really a difference between an American director and an Italian director, but I think like the closest maybe in an American director way of like, and it's not the same, but the closest that I can think of is like what Wes Craven would create, what he created like in Nightmare on Elm Street, the sort of when they're in the nightmare, and I mean, he told more of a, it was more of a linear story, but again, no, maybe more cyclical because it all ends up being a nightmare. But I don't know, there's something, a different feeling, whereas with Argento, you feel sort of discombobulated or like a little like thrown off from it. And I think that's more of the style. But I do want to also talk about the acting because we're kind of, I feel like we're talking about the music and the dubbing. So I want to make sure maybe into the same conversation. The acting in general, like Betty, again, it's hard to decipher exactly what we might feel because it is so heavily dubbed, the film. But more than anything, I do want to talk about Daria Nicolodi, who, Dario Argento's former wife, partner. She she co-created Suspiria. I think, she has definitely also been talked about more now, but was for a long time kind of pushed aside. But she is kind of one of the best actresses I think I have ever seen. She is a complete chameleon. You have her. Yeah. She's a villain, amazing. She's the assistant in Tenebrae, amazing. In Inferno, she's sort of this like hypochondriac type of. She's not a hypochondriac, but sickly. And each character, she seems completely different, just like she does in opera as this agent who's firm but caring. And I think that her special effect is like one of the most interesting effects in the collection of Argento films, and that's saying a lot because he's got a lot of creative stuff. So I want to know what you both think about the, Dario Nicolodi, the acting in general, the special effects, like the whole eye effects with the eyes and everything. I'm going to have Tyler start us off on this one, but what did you guys think about that, about her performance and then the special effects, especially hers, but also the eye things, which I thought was super cool?
I love Daria Nicolodi. I think you took the exact word that I was going to say. She's very chameleon-esque. She can, kind of slide into any role. And she's almost unrecognizable. I mean, when I first started watching his movies, I wasn't like, oh, there's Daria Nicolodi, popping up, I believe she was in Deep Red. She was in, obviously, opera. She was in Suspiria, Inferno. And I'm probably forgetting a couple that she appeared in, and from one to the other, it's not like, oh, she's just playing the same character. She completely transforms into someone totally different and unrecognizable from anyone that she's played before. I think even her physicality is different enough in her various roles that looking side by side, you may not immediately say, oh, that's the same person. And I think she's a very gifted and talented creator and actor. And the peephole scene is one of my favorite scenes in any Argento movie. Yes. It's just tremendous camera work, and it's so cool looking, and it's so violent and so shocking. It's just so many different things, and I think it inspires the kind of reaction that he was probably trying to get, which was, the first time you see it, it just catches you off guard, and you're like, what the hell was that? That was so cool and so horrifying. And I think that particular scene works really well, and the effects in general. The first time I watched it, it just turned my stomach watching the needle, the needles on her cheeks, keeping her eyelids open. It was like I wanted to close my eyes because I couldn't watch as she just kept poking her sensitive, eyelid skin. Like, that's so painful. That part of your body is so just tender, sensitive, painful when you even just, pinch it or something. So it would be super uncomfortable. And it was also just disgusting to watch. But, like all of his films when he was really on, I've just come to appreciate it as one of those quirks, and kind of had to get over my sort of ocular phobia, I guess. But yeah, I love it all.
And yes, Xena, what did you think about Daria Nicolodi, the acting, the special effects?
Daria, like she's always amazing. Like Tyler, I didn't know it was her because it was just kind of like. But then when she turned to this, because I kind of saw her from behind at first, with the blonde hair and stuff, and then when she turned to the side, I'm like, oh my gosh. And I watched a little side story. I watched this movie called Paganini Horror, and she's in it, and it's like it's kind of like a similar thing where she's not really an agent, but she's helping them, like these girls, they're in a rock band and they rent out this mansion so they can film like this music video for a song that they stole. It's like a horror music video. Anyway, she kind of has like a similar role, but like you both said, she's just such a chameleon that she was just completely different. And I say this because even though it's like she is the agent in this one, she also has like a mother figure kind of vibe to her when it comes to Betty that I really love, and you've seen her in, again, possibly similar roles, but I didn't pick that up, so it's just the way she was just so great with her craft. Truly she was such a talented woman, and I even say that even with the cast as a whole, there's just something very satisfying about the performances. Even with the dubbing, everything was believable. I was completely in the story. Nothing really like snatched me out. And I feel like I keep on piggybacking off of Tyler, but surprise, I also really love that peephole scene. That seeing that for the first time, I am an emotional watcher, meaning I like to scream and make sounds and throw things. And that really just made me scream. Seeing the bullet come out, it went straight. We kind of like see it making its way towards her. And it was just like, what else can you do but just scream for her? And it was too late,
Yeah.
And then we just see blood splatter. And it's just like, then we hear the scream from Betty, like, just genius, like just a genius. And then even when it comes with the stuff with the eyes, oh my gosh, that there were a couple of scenes that were honestly making my eyes water. Like I have a weird thing with my eyes. I don't like for things to be like too close to it as I'm like putting my sharp nails in front of my eye, but it's a true thing, I definitely would probably most likely end up stabbing my eyeballs out if I were like, if I was in that type of situation, like how can you just stay, I won't make the face, but how can you keep your eyes
Right,
like that?
right.
That's insane. So, and then it just, throughout the film, it just kept happening to her. But I want to kind of talk about Betty. I have a question, if that's okay.
Please.
Because you guys, you've watched this movie many times before. Do you guys think that the way Betty reacted towards death, is that weird? And I understand her backstory with her witnessing, like, her mother and and stuff like that. But it was just kind of weird. It was just like she was just fine. Like, okay, this is it, and she just kind of moved on. So I'm just curious to see like how you both feel.
Well, let me say first, I'm going to have Tyler field that question actually a little bit stronger. Just following up with Dario Argento, I did want to say that with her performance, one of the things I really love about her too is that, like you were saying about the mothering, I really like, because I feel like I would be the same way in a situation like that where she's like terrified. Then as soon as she has a knife, she's like, okay, fight me now. I want you to come in here now. But then the moment a noise will go off and she'll start running like terrified. I really loved that sort of like high, low, high, low. And overall, the theme of eyes, I feel like, Dario Argento always has some pretty strong themes in his work. And I really like the theme in opera about the eyes. It's not, it's the eyes that she's forced to watch it, but there's a lot of death that's centered around eyes or injury. Dario Argento's character, the killer, is, his eye is poked out. And I just think that's a really interesting theme that I'd like to discuss later. But Tyler, do you want to maybe I feel like, I'll just say for me, I feel like, I think it's a lot to do with her childhood. She's kind of been walking this balance for a while. I did a lot of theater and stuff. It's high stress, high tension. You can crack pretty easily. So I feel like I can understand her like disillusionment with reality. But Tyler, please.
I don't know that I'd ever given too much thought to the way that she reacts to death, but that is a fair point. I think that she perhaps doesn't react exactly as we might expect someone to. But what I really love about Betty is that Christina Marsillach, maybe is how you say it, who plays her, just portrays her as so kind of fragile. It feels like you almost can't even look at her too long or she might break.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if that how some kind of ties in. I mean, maybe she almost doesn't react to it because it would just break her if she did. I don't know. I mean, I don't quite know what the motivation by having her play it off kind of so nonchalant was. But I really did, like I said, just like the actress that portrayed her played her is so fragile and kind of broken, and like she needed to be protected, which is maybe why Daria Nicolodi had that kind of maternal quality towards her, because her character could kind of see that Betty just needed someone to look out for her best interest, because she almost couldn't do it on her own somehow.
Well, we learned that she's very superstitious when it comes to the whole Macbeth curse.
Right.
Like you said, when we first see Daria Nicolodi and Betty is like coming out of a sleep. She's like waking up. She's like nervous. And I think like she's definitely the type of person who, when watching a horror movie, would close their eyes or look away. So I think that her, like, and I think then once, if that was the case, if she saw death but was able to look away, she may have reacted a little bit more normally. But the fact that she is that type of person and then forced to see this, I think that's a contributing factor to why then she's like, I need to just walk out into the rain now and kind of, get into this car, and I'm going to worry about the heat right now. I think it's this sort of like, because she couldn't remove herself in the moment, she has to remove herself. And it does probably go back to, she's clearly somebody who has a pattern of blocking things out for the whole mother subplot, which I really liked that they inserted scenes of deaths that happened 10 years before, that it's almost like it's one of the, this is what's great about opera, is that it is a movie to go back and watch. I would recommend, because you see things the second time through. Like, it does almost seem like, what is this girl in a blue dress running up the stairs about? Like, what did that have to do with anything? Okay. And then and you're like, almost like, gosh, this is kind of poor filmmaking. But that's sort of the brilliance of Dario Argento, is that he has a lot of great cinematic style, but he pretends he's almost like a B movie director, and then he's kind of like, oh no, see, it all kind of made sense in the end. This was a flashback, so it's coming out of like, there's a purpose to it, even though it might not seem that way. So I don't know, Xena, does that kind of answer your questions in general about that?
It does. It definitely does.
Well, I also really want to talk about one of my favorite things about Dario Argento, and it was one of my favorite little things from opera, but it's also when I watched Suspiria, like I said, I watched Suspiria, and then I followed it up right away with Inferno. And one of the things I loved about Inferno, Phenomena, all of those are the secret passageways. I love that. I feel like in an American film, there would be more of a setup. Like, it's there. He does set it up at the beginning that you're kind of like, is there somebody in a vent? What is that about? Okay. But you never see it again. Whereas in an American film, you would have had a lot of shots of the vents, or like the history of the building and the old air vents, but you'd hear it. But with Argento, because he barely shows it to you, all of a sudden the door flings, you're like, how is she going to get out of here? And bam, this vent door opens, and you're like, what? And you're like, go, go, go. And so I love that. But also in Inferno, you have the underwater ballroom. It's sort of like a little passageway to another world. Or even later on with the main character, when he's like going through, or Jennifer Connelly in Phenomena, she's crawling through this little dungeon thing to the nasty death pit. I don't know if I really have a comment to make other than I love it. So what do you both think of scenes like that, or when he does that? I think some people might look at it as like, oh, there could have been a better setup. I think that's an American way of thinking. I personally love these sort of like abrupt, oh, okay, there's a random passageway here. That's how we're going to get through. And I love it. I just love it. Tyler, do you want to start us off with that one?
I probably, one of the reasons I love him so much is his overuse of secret passageways. That's like one of my favorite cinematic tropes. Ever since I was a kid, I've wanted like a secret room, and I've wanted, from playing Clue, like I wanted a secret passage from the conservatory to the library. I mean, like in my house though, which neither of those rooms which we actually had, but I love that so much, and the vent system is vent sequence is one of my favorite scenes in that entire movie. I love that in Die Hard. I love it in Chopping Mall. I just, when I bought my home, I was kind of disappointed that the vents are like actually this thick in real life, and I can't crawl around in them. I mean, I was, my bubble was kind of burst. But in all seriousness, I love that scene, and I don't think that there necessarily has to be excessive setup. I think as long as something is introduced once, even briefly, it's acceptable to make a callback to it. And so I would never criticize that. And the underwater scene and the passageways between the floors in Inferno, I just love. They just so and all encompassing. Like I just feel like I'm there in that moment, and it's just an incredible feeling. So that's truly one. Aside from great music choices and atmosphere and use of color, his use of secret passageways is one of my favorite things about him as a creator.
Yeah, especially because it is that sort of feeling of like, don't go in there. You're not going to go in there, but you're like, oh, you got to go in there, go in there, go in there. I want to see it. But Xena, what do you think? What do you think about all that?
Well, this is again one of the reasons why I wish I would have watched it when I was a kid, because I too was obsessed with secret passageways. Ever since Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs, it was my dream to have a house like that. And yeah, my bed's, I can't fit in it. It's probably the size like this. Like how am I? It's not the same. Anyway, but yeah, I love the fact that he does it. I kind of wish that more directors, more filmmakers, they would take advantage of that, because I don't really feel like we see that too often. And even though sometimes with Dario's movies, it is kind of like, it's coming, or hey, where did that come from type of thing, that random little girl, even though we saw her previously, but still. Point is, I kind of wish that we would get more of that, more of secret passageways. And I feel like not only is he like the master of horror, the master of giallo, he's also the master of secret passages.
Well, I have to apologize to you both, because I have like secret passageways all over my upstairs. Like the walls, it looks like it's all walls up here, but there's like little panels you can move and like little spaces to crawl through. I always say, like, if like a killer broke in, I'm like, I've got 3 places to go right now that I can be. And that's what I love about it. It's when you have somebody vulnerable, like Jamie in Halloween 5, the sort of laundry chute sequence. It's like it's a momentarily realistic escape, or like you could believe in this big opera or this in opera in this big old apartment building, that there would be these sort of passageways that you could kind of, it's a way to like, it's something different than just opening up the window and crawling out, or running through the back door, running up the stairs. It's just a little bit more interesting, I think. So
do you mean to tell me that I came to visit you and you didn't show me your secret passageways?
I'm sorry. It's a fun thing. I've got videos hidden in there. I have storage, but also you wouldn't even know looking at it. You just pull a little panel and you could crawl right in there, and it's pretty.
Why don't you like hang out in there?
Well, I'm a bigger boy, so sometimes I'm claustrophobic too, so that's not the it's a little bit lost on me. But I do love knowing it's there. It makes it a little bit more fun. But was there anything specifically either of you wanted to make sure that we talked about either Dario Argento, opera, another film of his?
Well, I have a question for you guys. So, do you have? I know Tyler did say like the bullet, the bullet scene. But besides from that, is there a particular scene that you really love? For whatever.
In Dario Argento altogether, or opera?
In opera.
In opera, okay. Because I do want to say my favorite in Dario Argento ever is the Jennifer Connelly and Phenomena, the nasty pit sequence. It's one of the moments that I'm watching with people that I'm like, it's coming. They're gonna see it. It's coming. But in opera, I think it might be the Daria Nicolodi sequence with the eye. But I also really even though as bizarre as it is, and I'm really glad you asked that question, Zena, because I feel like we probably should talk about this. The absurdity of how everything kind of gets revealed about the killer with the ravens and all that. I actually really do like that sequence, though. I love the sort of we're watching this opera, Macbeth, being performed. I love the sort of late 80s aesthetic to it. What I would have, because I grew up in the 80s, so it's kind of what I imagined adults went out to do was to like go out into the city and see things like this. And so it's like right there realized for me. But I love the sort of camera work of how you get to see sort of like the mother daughter in the audience. You get to see
Mhm.
various cast members, and it's like it's all about to happen. So I love the sort of that sequence with the crow, or I'm sorry, the raven flying around, the camera work of it. I just think it's really interesting and visually pleasing to see. And I would like to just say that that mother and daughter, like when she smacks that daughter for helping her, like I don't mean to laugh, but it is almost sort of like it was the late 80s. That probably is exactly what would have happened.
Right.
And the I love that Betty, who she's just so gone now, she just went through this crazy experience. She kind of just hears that. But I love that sort of like it's foreshadowing to her own relationship with sort of a cruel mother. Like she's
Mhm.
just like absorbing it like this is normal. Because she doesn't go back in to help the girl. She doesn't do anything. And you are kind of like, okay, she's just okay with it, but you then come to realize why. But Tyler, what about you? What's your favorite?
Well, probably my top three have already been mentioned, which is the crows kind of solving the mystery as to the
Yeah.
killer's identity, the peephole scene and the vent scene. But my other favorite thing about it, perhaps, is that you never see the face of the original leading lady, that it's
Yeah,
all
for
shot from
sure,
her
for sure.
perspective in the opening. I just think that's really kind of outside the box and unexpected, and it just always makes me curious as to like, what does she look like, what is she wearing, like, it just makes my mind start kind of, makes the wheels start turning in my head. And I really love that about it. I just think it's an unusual choice, and I can't think of too many other movies that have done something quite like that. So I just think it's unique and it really stands out to me.
Piggybacking onto that, I love too the effects of like he does something different with the camera for the POV shots. Instead of it always going forward, it's going backwards. And again, I think that's thematic to like we're gonna find out something from the past. But even the like present day with the opera singer, the unseen one, it's like being pulled from her point of view, but it's going backwards all the time. Or when he
Mhm.
goes up the stairs or down the stairs, it's like reverse. I think that's interesting. Zena, did you say what your favorite moment or scene was?
Um, yes, kind of. So I do love like the peephole scene, as well. And
Mhm.
I also just want to throw in there two more. I really love the opening because again, I really wasn't too sure what to expect, and I kind of
Yeah.
feel like it like set the tone for it. And this is another beautiful, lavish, Dario Argento movie with blood and murder. So it's like that perfect mixture. And then just me just being silly, but the
The
seamstress. You guys remember the
seamstress.
seamstress?
Mhm.
I laughed, and I'm so sorry. I laughed so hard when the killer threw the iron at her. That just it looked
Yeah,
like it hurt, like
yeah.
and because she was like taunting the
Is
killer,
this what you
and
want?
you
Is
know,
this what you want?
and it
But
just
I
had
like
the
that she was a
perfect scene.
fighter too. She fought it, she kept going, and then she had a horrible death. For some
It
reason, he like
was
puts it through her. Oh,
it was
but
horrible, but
yeah, no,
yeah.
I'm glad you brought her up because I think she's fun too, and I really like that you used the word lavish. I think that's a great adjective to describe Dario Argento in general, but this film. It definitely has some bizarre moments. I think, not everybody's going to respond well to the
Mhm.
whole, like, you have to have a lot of suspension of disbelief because it is sort of like you're entering into a nightmare. And in a nightmare, a raven or crow would maybe solve a murder, or, like that is something that you're kind of like when you speak out loud after a dream and you think you're like saying something profound, you're like, and then this raven, poked out this guy's eye, and you're like, wait, what did I just say? That's kind of what he does, and what makes it just a little bit different and interesting. Tyler, for you, was there anything else that you specifically wanted to talk about with opera or Dario Argento in general?
I just, following up on the seamstress, thought that dress was really hideous, and I couldn't understand what all the fuss was about. But no, nothing other than that.
For sure. And that was it too for you, Xena?
That was it. Just thank you both again for seriously, this is one of my favorite Dario Argento movies. Like I feel like it's brilliant.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad that we got to sit around and talk about it. And I know that opera was, pretty well received at the time, especially for Dario Argento films at the time. But I think it has really grown to be overlooked now for the most part. And like we talked about with Xena, you love Dario Argento, but you hadn't seen this one yet either. And while it doesn't necessarily top my list of Argento films, it's definitely up there, and it really encompasses most of the best of what Argento is known to do. I think Argento just likes to tell a good visual story. His narrative can be thin, and it can sometimes be a little clumsy, but in the best possible ways, because the viewer is also going to see a little beauty, a little madness, some creative gory effects. And I feel like, in the end, we're always going to be entertained. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. What are some of your favorite Dario Argento movies, and are you a fan of opera? You can also find Xena over at Wicked Horror or at realqueenofhorror.com or on YouTube under her Real Queen of Horror moniker. You can find Tyler over at Wicked Horror as managing editor and as a contributing white writer at Dread Central. And I'm Justin Steele. You can also find me at Wicked Horror, 411 Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. And thank you, Tyler and Xena, for joining me to talk about opera and Dario Argento.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely. We'll see y'all soon.